here's the mistakes that the agents and the police made that I think, again, made this just the perfect murder for everybody to still be talking about all these years later about him being innocent. So, like we said, they did not seal off the crime scene. 26 people were all over it. Oh, here it is. The ambulance driver stole MacDonald's wallet. They lost the blue fiber under Kristen's fingernail, a piece of skin beneath one of Colette's nails. They turned over Colette's body and moved the pajama top. And even the Esquire magazine that had 18 similarities from the Manson murders wasn't realized until several agents had been flipping through the pages for days. They hoped for a confession to cover their mistakes, but 7 weeks later, they were advised MacDonald's of his rights. He didn't confess. He agreed to a polygraph test, but then he changed his mind, and that's when they put him under armed guard.
So also on messing with the crime scene, I believe it was the photographer had to wait around, and the flower pot that you had talked about that was on his side, he actually made it upright. Yeah. And there's a picture of that. The phone, someone put the phone back on the, what do you call that? There's receiver. What was that called back then?
The receiver.
That landline situation.
So I guess in the military, they do Article 32s is what they're called. And all the mistakes kicked off, a series of events that caused a lot of confusion, a lot of problems for the prosecutors. So first, it has to be said that MacDonald really freaked people out. And the reason why, his own lawyer, is he had a total lack of affect when he would describe the murders. No emotion whatsoever. And Segal, his first attorney, was so disturbed by his lack of emotion that he had a psychiatrist evaluate him. Now, this is weird. His conclusions were that he had, quote, possibly some latent homosexual conflicts and some narcissistic need to be famous or infamous. He did say that he was, quote, fairly certain MacDonald hadn't killed his family, and that became the centerpiece of his defense. Homosexual conflict? What the heck is he talking about?
I came across on a couple of psychiatrists and psychologists that evaluated him.
In the 60s and 70s, though, they went straight to that if you acted out of the norm.
I was wondering because he definitely liked women. So I thought, well, maybe he liked both.
In the 70s, I heard that a lot.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting story when he was a teenager that I immediately thought, oh, there's some weird stuff happening there.
Do tell.
So, man, woman, and son had came to visit. Like his Jeffrey MacDonald's parents didn't even meet this couple, and immediately liked Jeffrey and his brother Jay, his older brother Jay. They had dinner. They went out and had dinner. Then they offered Jeffrey to come and stay with, or offered Jeffrey, they lived in Texas, offered for him to come and stay with them a couple of weeks. He was in high school. He ended up going, not during a holiday, was supposed to stay a couple of weeks, ended up staying for a couple of months. Him and the father were very attached. Were very close, and it was kind of a weird relationship according to the wife. Or did she say, I felt he was getting too close? I don't know. There was a weird comment she made. And then there was starting to be some issues with the son and Jeffrey. But he was there for months.
So maybe he was bisexual, because we know he definitely loved women too. Or was he covering up? Because back in that day, that was a huge deal.
I feel like he was covering up because every single time he talked, he always immediately started going to his sex life. It was weird.
That's the only thing that ever came out. You would think more would come out if he was with men.
Back then?
I don't know, because it was illegal back then still.
Well, now, years later, they, would think so.
Have relationships.
Yeah. Maybe. but definitely a narcissist. And
Oh.
it wouldn't surprise me if he had a high psychopath level 2 on the scale.
He never showed any emotion ever.
Mm-mm.
Well, actually,
I
he
never
did on
saw
weird things. It wasn't about the
Well, not the
family.
murders though.
Yeah, he had, I'll find it here. I highlighted it because there was a couple of times, but this last one I thought was so weird how it was during the grand jury possible whatever to see if they were going to go ahead and start the trial, but he was fine the whole time. He was angry, but fine the whole time, and then would start sobbing about something that's like, why are you crying about that? You never cry about your family, but you're crying about that.
Well, he did that interview with that late night talk show host, and
Yep.
and it freaked out one of the helpers that was her job, and she's like, he did it.
Yeah.
And he even laughed and said, well, that interview is what sparked Freddie as well to really amp up his efforts. And then the police decided to look at it again because of the way he was acting. Now, initially,
He did with the parents. He did one with the parents.
I never saw or heard of that one, but the one he did, Freddie knew he was lying about stuff. And Freddie Kassab at first thought he was innocent. There was no way. In fact, the parents knew him before Colette knew him, I believe. And they really liked him. And I've got some pictures of that put on the Instagram of like the mother dancing with him. She was pretty too.
Junior high, he would start to come over to the house and things like that. So they were
he even said, if I ever had another daughter, I'd still want the same son-in-law. They were absolutely broken by the murders. And Kassab funneled his grief into finding the killers, and he put up a $5,000 reward for information leading to the rest of the murders. And it's here that the now infamous Helena Stokely came into the picture. And what we know, especially from Wilderness of Error, so there's Helena Stokely, is that one of the cops, like Helena, was around a lot that area. And here's the sketch.
Yeah, they knew her.
And so it wouldn't surprise me if Jeffrey MacDonald had seen her, and possibly even that night. You know what I mean? So that whole thing from the start, I could see how she would have been the scapegoat. And then here's Freddie and Mrs. Kassab. Here's Jeffrey and Colette's wedding day. And then I found this picture of them when they were both really young.
But Helena admitted that she'd been in the house and that happened, but it was foggy. She went back and forth
a lot.
If you look at all the times she said that, she was being paid money. So we'll get into more of that in a bit. But a 22-year-old delivery man named William Posey said that he noticed his neighbor's car pull in at 4 a.m. the night of the murders when he was going to the bathroom. He saw the Mustang pull in and Helena with 2 to 3 males in the car. He said that Helena said 2 weeks later that she's going to have to leave town because police have been hassling her about the murders. She told them that the problem was she couldn't remember anything because she's so high on drugs, including LSD. Helena also wore blonde wigs and floppy hats regularly back to the murders. She never wore them again. Well, the CID agents, and especially Ivory, they already knew all about her. Yeah. At the time he called, they already knew. In fact, they'd already spoken with her. And she said she hadn't said anything useful except that she no longer had the floppy hat or wig. So, they paused on that. But she said she was sure she had never been in that house because she didn't even know where it was. It was so unhelpful that Agent Ivory didn't even take notes. And the colonel presiding over Article 32 hearing, he did want more investigation into her and recommended that civilian authorities investigate her further and see if they can find out anything about her role. I think that Posey just wanted the 5K. And he fingered his weird, spacey, drug-addicted neighbor as the one that did it. But what do you think?
So one of the interesting things about when they were interviewing her is that they would ask her a question, and for instance, she would go, "I don't know." "Oh, okay," and he would just move on. Like she would just give an answer, maybe if she felt like it, and he would just move on. It was a very bad interview, very bad investigation to her.
And y'all said it was the Cavett show, right?
Yeah, Dick Cavett.
Okay. I wanted to play that in a minute.
And on that one, and I'm sure you'll mention this, but one of the things that struck me was that he immediately went into his ordeal and what was going on with him. It was an I thing, which again, we've seen that with the other.
Like Chris Watt, I need to see them again. This house isn't the same. I.
You can see Dick Cavett though in a few scenes.
Yeah.
Totally, you could tell that's crap.
Yes.
We didn't believe him at all.
So everything would have ended there. There was no evidence that they could for sure say pin on MacDonald. And I believe he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Freddie Kassab. Mm-hmm. So at this point, Mr. Kassab was enraged with the Army and its hounding of MacDonald. I mean, he thought these people are ridiculous. And so what he did is he set out to get to the bottom of the ordeal to help his son-in-law.
Well, and here's one thing about that I didn't know was that they were never told what happened. They had bare minimum information. Jeffrey MacDonald wouldn't talk about it. It wasn't being reported, the details or anything.
Yeah.
So whenever he went to bat for him, it was based on the person he knew, not any details.
Right.
And after the Cavett show, that's when he actually got the details. And was
but even before the Cavett show, something was starting to bother him, and it was the transcript, because he had asked MacDonald several times for the transcripts of the hearings
and to get details of the murders.
Right. And MacDonald kept putting him off for months and assured him that he and some Green Beret buddies had tracked down one of the killers and put him, quote, 6 feet under. But Kassab wouldn't be put off. And so he finally got the transcripts. Now, in the meantime, MacDonald immediately applied for an honorable discharge. He disposed of all of his family's possessions in a yard sale. He moved to New York. He began searching for a journalist to pay for his story while he socialized with Countess Christina Paolozzi. He also appeared on the Dick Cavett show, making wisecracks, no emotion at all. And he was so disturbing that one lady told Cavett that he did it. And his searching for a journalist and getting someone to write his book would come to bite him in the you-know-what later. But that's the book Fatal Vision. And the Wilderness of Error podcast, I don't know if it's called that. I think it might be what they go into that whole thing, how that journalist thought he was innocent and he was going to follow him around. And then he's like, the more he's around him, the more he sees things. He's like, man, this guy is as guilty as sin. And he didn't even tell Jeffrey he thought that. He just published the book.
I think the main thing that made him think that is really when he went to his apartment in Newport.
Mm-hmm.
Found that stuff. They made a movie of that book too.
So yeah, it's called Fatal Vision. Mm-hmm. So another thing, right before he could get the transcript, and Kassab was still going to bat for him, still trying to investigate, find people, find justice. He had met with a major magazine. Jeffrey MacDonald's attorney found out, and behind Kassab's back demanded a fee to be made to Jeffrey MacDonald for this interview. Kassab was super excited about the interview or the newspaper because they assured him that they had investigators on staff that would put FBI to shame. So he was excited to be able to properly investigate and find the people who murdered their family. MacDonald was like, because he taped every conversation. And he did that way before this too, by the way. But Jeffrey MacDonald, yeah,
real smart of the dad.
Jeffrey MacDonald immediately called his attorneys. Within minutes, the attorney immediately called Kassab told him to cease all interviews. It's like, and again, part of it was for money. They felt Jeffrey should have been paid money, but also, why would you stop investigation if you were that worried and concerned about finding the people who killed?
Then after he told them that they took care of one of the murders, it's like, okay, what are we in, Rambo? I mean, what the hell? And so he's like looking for reports of some, dude that was murdered and, disappeared. So he couldn't find anything. I think he even called some people.
I think a lot was his ego too, because of Green Beret. He mentioned that many times in interviews, that he was a Green Beret. So I think his ego is, oh, we'll find it and we'll take care of it.
So part of the killing of one of the individuals, he supposedly had broke his hand. Well, he didn't know he was being under surveillance, but Kassab did. So Kassab made that phone call and he was like, no.
That's right.
Fully functioning, no medical bills that he claimed was $2,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Kassab, he gets the transcript and he goes over it with a fine tooth comb. And
you know how hard that would be?
Oh, I don't see how they do it.
But then on the love of a child or a parent or a sibling, it's just, you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, one thing Elena found out is that they had already lost all of their daughters prior to Colette. So this was like a big deal. And
she had, stillborn babies.
Yeah. And then when Colette had her first daughter, she said, here is a daughter, one of the daughters you lost, or something like that. So she was a broken woman, I'm sure, at this point. And so he's going to find the truth. He's not going to stop. And so he found things in there that couldn't be true. Like MacDonald said that he saw a blood bubble from Kimberly's chest, but the room was dark and she didn't have any chest wounds. That's why the knife couldn't have been in her chest.
Right.
He also learned that there was no dead killer 6 feet under. And then the CID agents weren't happy about things either. They had watched the Dick Cavett show and decided to look over things again. So they're pissed off too. At that point, Kassab requests to view the crime scene. Because like Elena said, he'd never seen anything. He didn't know what happened. He found himself back at 545 Castle Drive going over the crime scene inch by inch. And when he left there, MacDonald was his enemy. So let me bring up this interview that got him really upset.
And I want to mention something about Kassab in the apartment.
Somebody found something.
Public opinion.
My next guest is Dr. Jeffrey MacDonald.
Yeah, you can see Dick Cavett's demeanor start to change.
MacDonald appeared on the popular late-night program, The Dick Cavett Show.
I hope this isn't too painful for you.
Where it became very clear MacDonald was fast becoming his own worst enemy.
My wife came home and we had a before bedtime Joe grilled and watched the beginning of a late-night talk show.
Playing up the audience.
He knew how to handle himself. Dick Cavett remembers well the night he was with MacDonald.
His affect is wrong, totally wrong. My affect was, gee, find your wife and kids murdered. And even his answer to that was something like, hey, yeah, and that's almost sound like Bob Hope. Very like Bob Hope.
There were people in the army who wanted a court martial, regardless of any of it.
I was angry.
You were very critical, in fact.
I'm sure I was.
Where are these investigators now who did the original? Well, most of them have been transferred. It's the only way of handling things. If someone really fouls up, you give them a medal and you transfer them.
That's when Dick Cavett started to change, I think.
Colette's family was extremely disturbed by MacDonald's appearance. Colette's older brother, Robert Stevenson.
I liked him.
That was how his rights had been violated. I don't think he once mentioned about, let's get the murderers. My family's been killed. But I remember him grinning like a Cheshire cat.
Okay, so so that's like that same smile Chris Watts had.
Yeah.
The whole time he was talking. And, like he said, in the Army, the way they handle things is you either get transferred or what did he say? kicked out or something like that. Promoted. So, he's going after them, and now they're mad. And they're like, okay, we're going to go after you at this point. And I feel they knew he did it. It wasn't like, oh, you're going to diss us on TV, so we're going to make your life miserable. They just didn't know how to get this guy. And so with Kasab and the CID agents, it was on again.
So when Kasab went to the apartment with several other agents, they were there for hours, I think at least 7 or 8 hours. And part of it was during the day, and they wrestled around, they ran, things were falling down like the cards. But then that evening, which I thought was so smart, they wanted the sun to go down to make it light. They had only the 2 lights on that he said, which was the bathroom for sure, maybe kitchen or hall. And where the couch was, like he lay down on the couch. He had them come up where they supposedly were with Jeffrey MacDonald. You could not make out anything because of the lighting. And so there's no way he could have given details.
And so that's why he was so detailed, is he wanted to look like he got a good look, yet in that lighting, there's no way he would have had all those details. So it's dark and you're in shock because you're being attacked. There's no way.
Well, he did say that she had a flashlight.
Yeah.
On her face.
Yeah.
Which makes everything else around you darker.
You wouldn't have been able to tell if it was a black man or not. This is what I remember. And there was one where he described had stripes.
Sergeant stripes. Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have been able to see those. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have been able to see if she was wearing boots to her knee or not. So, and another interesting thing, in one of the interviews that he gave, not interview, but when he was being investigated, questioned, he 3 times started to say, when I got up from the bed, he kept messing up the bed and the couch. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that there was an issue in the bedroom. That's where it all began. That's where it happened.
So he was actually in bed in the bedroom and Colette came home.
Possibly.
Even if there was a little light, if you're frantic, you're not going to see those details anyway.
Yeah.
See, that's what I think too, because Colette asked in the psychology class about what to do when you have a child that keeps sleeping in the bed. And then she explained that it was usually Jeffrey MacDonald and I think little Kristen, wasn't it? Yeah. And she's the one that ended up on the couch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the bedwetting was a big issue. She also asked him about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I personally think that I feel like that's what set him off. Something to do in the bedroom, something to do with the baby, and possibly the pee.
Well, and I could see how that would bother her because he's already gone out on her lots and lots of times. You know that as a wife, the daughter being in the bedroom all the time is going to interfere with them being intimate. So that was probably something that was a big deal for her. She was trying to solve that issue because in her mind, she might have thought the reason he's going out all the time is they have like 2 daughters and home life is a little bit chaotic at times. And, that she's just looking for a way to preserve her marriage.
Or might have also been thinking with the fighting and him running around and they fought pretty often that it could be making the child wet the bed. Emotional.
That's true.
Something to protect the child, not the man.
Something else on like the relation that you talked about. So she was 5 months pregnant, and he, in one of his interviews or questioning, he flat out said he was not attracted to her. She was 5 months pregnant, and they weren't active at that time. So that's a good point. Yeah, he just didn't seem to be a very good husband.
Yeah, he sucks. Okay, so MacDonald moves. He's living the high life. He moved to Long Beach, California. He was an ER physician at St. Mary Medical Center. He had a yacht, a marina front condo, and many, many girlfriends.
I thought he lived in Newport.
Long Beach, California. The CID discovered that he had lots of girlfriends for a long time. They also discovered that their marriage was not in a good place. At the time, get this, he had 15 girlfriends.
Not only that, you mean 15 girlfriends when they were married or when he was in Long Beach?
No, at the time, that he killed his wife. He had 15 girlfriends, and he had seduced many of them on training missions. And Colette knew about the affairs, according to her sister-in-law. And she said that Colette had told her, I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. Colette had even called, and this is sad, had called her mother when she found out that MacDonald would be away on another one of these training missions during the last stages of what could be a dangerous pregnancy. Her mother told her to wait till spring. 2 days later, Colette was dead.
Yeah.
And then even after she was murdered, he had a healthy libido, sleeping with Fort Bragg secretary as often as possible, even when accused of murdering his family.
And he was on watch. Yeah. Disgusting.
Yeah. And so people are like, okay, what's up with this? Well, he said, well, I did step out on Colette, MacDonald tells his visitor with a wet of his lips, none of which I am proud of. Then in a cascade, the explanations tumble out. I don't think they were real girlfriends. They were one-night stands. I never had a love affair with anyone where we planned weekends away or divorce. I wore my wedding ring. It was the temper of the times. I like women, and I wasn't thinking of the consequences. I had high testosterone. Among guys around me and people in medical school and the service, I wasn't doing anything unusual. It was 68 and 70, and a lot of things were exploding. He then lowers his voice and adds, I essentially wasn't screwing around. It's not true. Colette had no fears or worries. There weren't any.
Yeah, very odd.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones where he went on his training, you know, he would often meet up with women. There was usually a group of them. And before he took one of them back to his room, he had a conversation with his wife, and the woman was just sitting there. I mean, it was like conducting, and it was a conversation, like a good conversation with his wife right in front of this chick about the babies and everything. Like, how you doing? You doing okay?
He didn't think that was cheating. You know
Right.
what? He also, he taught at a school in UCLA about child abuse and recognition and treatment for child abuse, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Huh.
He also taught on CPR and resuscitation. That was
So
his.
he would have known. So she wasn't stabbed in the chest. The knife was never in the chest. But while he's doing CPR, the blood bubble comes out. So on top of all this crazy stuff that he's doing, classmates described Helena Stokely as a disturbed, sad little girl who liked to make up stories to get attention. So I thought that was interesting. And during the time Posey said that she said the police were looking at her was actually when they weren't looking at her at all. They did later, but not at that point when he said that. She did leave town 2 months later to rehab between using heroin 8 to 9 times a day along with other drugs. She was diagnosed as a schizoid personality. Later, Posey took a lie detector test and flunked it. He admitted he wasn't sure that he had seen Helena that night and that maybe he had glimpsed a Mustang only in a dream 2 months later.
Yeah.
A
It's
dream.
really weird.
Yeah.
Like-
and so,
Reliable, consistent stories throughout this entire thing. Even the parents, oh, everything was fine. We never saw them fight. Da, 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 da. And then their interview changed to, yeah, she kept crying the last time we saw her, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody changed their story.
and I think, when you think back to that time, divorcing your husband was like a no-no. Most parents would say, no, you need to stay and work it out. Like most would do that. Today, we'd be like, get out of there now. If he's got 15 girlfriends, you need to leave him.
Although they did encourage, she got pregnant. So they decided to go ahead and get married, came to talk to them, her parents. They were encouraging them to get an abortion because it would ruin his career. They were concerned. His family was like, no, y'all get married, have the baby, da, da, da. So it was really weird dynamic with the consultant.
And that's a more liberal dynamic with her family then.
Yeah.
Huh.
In the 60s, well, I was still a kid, but you didn't. Divorce wasn't something you worked it out. You just didn't get divorced when someone cheated. You're like in my state.
Because Elena's getting antsy.
I am. Thank you.
I love this story.
So we know that Stokely went back and forth several times, but often it was under tremendous pressure to say she did it by defense investigators and MacDonald supporters. And guys, if y'all do a Google search on this investigator and what all they did to her, it's very apparent why she kept saying she did it. So she told CID that she'd say anything just to get them off her back. They never matched her fingerprints or hair to anything. And we'll get into that one blonde fake hair. And even more incriminating is when investigators folded MacDonald's pajama top just so, the 48 perfectly round holes lined up with the 21 ice pick wounds in Colette's chest. So during his trial, they simulated MacDonald's story of the pajama top and him fending off attacks. And the pajama top had long, jagged tears, not perfect little holes. Plus, in the demonstration, one of the attorneys had a bleeding cut from the exercise, unlike MacDonald, whose forearms had never been nicked.
Right.
Helena also told the jury that she was too stoned to remember where she was that night. And then finally, MacDonald testified at his trial. He choked up and was tearful on the stand. At times, he was so overwrought that he couldn't speak, which was way different than how he appeared on the tape the prosecution played when he'd been interviewed 10 years before. MacDonald was stunned when it took the jury only 6 hours to find him guilty of second-degree murder, which I think second-degree fits because it wasn't premeditated, of Colette and Kimberly, but first-degree for Kristen, because he could have stopped at that point. He was even more stunned when the judge sentenced him to the maximum sentence. He was so arrogant that he even said, "This is the best jury money can buy."
So about that's disgusting. But about all the different trials, so there was the Article 32 situation. Yeah. They acquitted him of that or whatever they did. No charges were put upon him. Then years later, after Kassab relentlessly kept pursuing it, they went before a grand jury. The grand jury decided to go ahead. However, his attorney was very smart. He obviously objected and appealed based on double trial and the right to a speedy attorney. So he's waiting to see if the appeals are going to work. The appeals work. So there was going to be no charges pressed. However, they then went to the Supreme Court. The justice system went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court went ahead and allowed for the trial. So it's like he just kept going back and forth. And that wasn't the last time. It continued. He was actually out after being convicted.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like you said, I mean, it kicked off appeals, protests of innocence. I wanted to read you guys this account from The Devil and Jeffrey MacDonald. It's an article I found of bringing Helena Stokely back into it all again, because his friends hired a former chief of LA's FBI, Ted Gunderson, at $100 an hour. Research how they were with Helena. I mean, it was incredible. So it says, fast though he was, within 24 hours, he told his employers, "Has your boy been railroaded?" To prove it, Gunderson enlisted Prince Beasley, who had not been prospering the last 6 years. First, state of police had discovered him passed out drunk in the middle of an intersection because he was a cop. This led to his retirement from the Fayetteville force and hospitalization at a VA facility where he's diagnosed as suffering from progressive non-psychotic organic brain syndrome. Among the manifestations of his illness, doctors found there was confusion and confabulation, which means making up stories without realizing they're being made up. So this is a guy that believes Helena is telling the truth, and he was on one of the shows, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The good news was that Beasley still had a line on Stokely, who had married and moved to South Carolina. Acting on this intelligence, Gunderson secured MacDonald's approval to dispatch a Canadian psychic. The notion that being her paranormal powers would put Stokely on an airliner. Stokely proved resistant, however, even after the psychic told her that she'd fallen in love with MacDonald and that the psychic could foresee a beautiful life for her if she aided in clearing his name. With Stokely temporarily out of the picture, Beasley turned his attentions to her husband, a violence-prone hippie named Ernie Davis, who at the point was residing in the Fayetteville jail thanks to an assault charge filed by his wife. According to Davis, Beasley presented himself at the lockup and promised to post bail and fly him to LA. All Davis had to do was promise to tell Beasley and Gunderson what they wanted me to about the MacDonald case. I mean, these guys were sleazy. Soon enough, Davis was in LA, where after more sweeteners like the prospect of a book and movie deal, he signed a statement repeating the incriminating claims Stokely had made since the killings. Gunderson, however, still wanted Stokely, but they couldn't find her. He found the means, or she wouldn't cooperate. He found the means when Beasley discovered that Davis, whose total remuneration had been $21 for a bus ticket, had jumped bail, was in South Carolina with Stokely. They tracked them down, slapped Davis in handcuffs. On the way back, Davis let it slip that he'd blabbed to Gunderson. This commenced in a fight, concluding that Stokely offered to tell all. Not pausing even to pick up a change of underwear, Beasley whisked Stokely to LA to begin 5 days of near round-the-clock interrogation. Homer Young, an ex-FBI agent assisting Gunderson, later told the Bureau that there had been, quote, an element of duress in Stokely's questioning and that his boss had employed, quote, unethical means and tactics in a very important case. The methods, though, got results, assured that she'd be resettled in California with a new house, job, and identity. Even a part in the forthcoming movie, Stokely signed a statement not only implicating herself in the murders, but naming 5 other killers, later referred to as black cult members as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess she had been threatened with 40 years in jail, and she was told that any statement she made would be for use in the movie. She didn't think it was going to be for the trial. She thought it was for the movie.
Yeah.
And so she was offered 20% of any movie proceeds and reaffirmed her role and added another killer named the Wizard. So
Wizard.
the prosecutor, Brian Murtaugh, he said, if you put everybody in the room who has confessed, you'll have no room for Jeff. Like, it was so many people. Everything pointed to Jeff. Well, and she recanted. And I guess the prosecutor said, you know that if you confess to this, he may get off. We're going to arrest you and you're going to go to jail. So she decided not to testify for MacDonald. But her decomposing body was found in a low-rent South Carolina apartment complex. She was only 30 years old. She and her baby were living on peanut butter sandwiches. Her cause of death was acute pneumonia and cirrhosis of the liver. They just hounded her, and I think they should be punished for what they did to her. So then MacDonald's only hope in his appeal in the Fourth Circuit court was Kathy Perry, who was Helena's friend. She had confessed that she was also there. So now you got 15 people. But much of the story was wrong. They didn't have any details of the murder correct. She was diagnosed as a schizophrenic, and once on proper medication, she denied any knowledge of the crimes. And then later, the FBI was able to corroborate the alibis for all the supposed accomplices, including one main character who actually was in jail at the time of the murder. But here's where even the captain and Nick didn't have this one figured out, but I found out. So it appeared that the defense had found new evidence to support the blonde hippie in the floppy hat. Okay. So the defense asked to see the evidence that the prosecutors had. And inside one cardboard box, they found an envelope labeled black/black and gray root/synthetic hairs. Then inside there was another envelope marked synthetic hairs blonde. And inside that envelope was a 22-inch long blonde colored synthetic strain of saran. Is that how you say it? That was recovered from a hairbrush of Colette's.
And just one strand.
One strand. And so now they're like, see, we've been saying there was a blonde hippie in the house, and now you found this hair. And why didn't we have this evidence to begin with? Right. The brush would probably be like, yeah, I don't think so. Well, the lab determined that this was actually not hair for human wigs. It was hair for doll hair.
That's right. Which makes total sense. Little kid using your mom's brush. Okay. Yeah.
But here's what's funny. The government attorney said, quote, unless the defendants want to maintain that Ken and Barbie did it, I don't see how this hair helps them very much. So finally, the justices agreed and ruled at some point, you must accept this case as final. So far to date, the only DNA found in the house matched MacDonald and his family. In an interview, he broke down talking about what had been done to him. And the most prolonged coming apart when he recounted finding my baby Christy, the dimpled little girl that his accuser said in court they'd laid on his lap, and as she gazed up at him, hands outstretched, stabbed 30 times. When MacDonald heard that in court, his body shook, his face turned red, he pounded the table, pulled his hair, bit his fist, as if lost in deathless grief. The problem? There's never a tear.
Yeah.
All right. Psychology. So what do you think? We got self-righteous, disappointed, economic, paranoid.
Paranoid?
Just 1 second. So one of the things the psychiatrist, psychologist, and even his own family members kept communicating, this will go into the four ones, is that he would constantly had to be the best,
Smartest,
most clever. The way he was perceived was insanely important to him.
the best family, the
Yeah.
best everything.
And so I don't think he fits in any of them.
Go over.
Because I don't think he meant, I think it was a rage. I think it was the drugs, the lack of sleep, his narcissistic, psychopathic tendency. So the self-righteous, they blame the crimes upon their spouse, the mom of the children, for the breakdown of the family. Disappointed, they believe the family has let him down or acted in ways that undermine or destroy his vision of an ideal life, which maybe. Anomic is the economic aspect, but he was doing fine. And a paranoid is an external threat, like from social services or the legal system, which he didn't have.
No, the only thing I could see maybe an afterthought blaming the family. I could see, but again, that goes with his personality of just, well, she shouldn't have done this, or if the baby wouldn't have been here, I wouldn't have done that. But that's total
He'll never admit
speculation.
it. When he had his parole hearing, they said, we don't care if you think you're innocent. We need you to admit this. Or
And he
you
wouldn't.
won't. And he refused to do it.
And I think that his wife had enough of him, spreading his seed all over the place, making her look bad too. Here she is pregnant with their first boy and these two little girls. And I think she had it. Because of that trip, they got in a huge fight, and he, being the little punk that he is, beat her to death, and then accidentally killed his one daughter, murdered his other one, and then made it all look like a crime. I think he was a spoiled little brat, and he will hopefully die in prison.
You know, they just had a hearing for him because after 40 years in some states, that's a life sentence. And you can use the defense of you're unhealthy. You have a little bit of life left. He's 77. He has to do kidney dialysis. They said,
oh, poor thing.
That he won't live but 3 years. Your husband
Good.
it. And but they denied
He
it.
won't. So he was the youngest, and his mom's relationship was very interesting.
You mentioned that, and that when she was told no reaction or something, I'm sorry, you almost got taken out by her mom with a blanket, but.
So Kassab Kassab and his wife, Colette's mom, met with Jeffrey's mom, and for 2 hours explained to her what he felt occurred, what was going on, what was wrong, why he felt Jeffrey did the murder. She sat there silent the entire time, 2 hours. She got up, said, "Thank you, I believe," walked out. That was it.
Wow.
But yeah, they had a very interesting relationship. I could see him being the baby, always catered to, spoiled.
Can't fail, best kid ever, best son ever. Yeah.
However, he strived to be as well.
And you know what's interesting is like they married because she was pregnant. Xavier married his pregnant girlfriend. It wasn't his kid. Didn't Chris and Shanann marry because she was pregnant? I think they did. I'm gonna have to look back at my notes, but I think
I do remember looking at a wedding dress to see if you could tell.
I thought it was in my notes. I'll look back, but that seems to be, I'm glad Mike didn't murder me. Like I was pregnant when we got married. I mean, if he starts talking about stuff like it'd be better if we're all dead, I will be heading to Texas.
Right.
So you guys know.
And just so he knows, we pack down here. So he can try to
up here. The problem is he does too.
take out the whole family, but he will not be successful.
So you guys have been, great with this little mini series, and
Thank you, Sherry. Mother, did you hear that?
Yes.
A moment to let that soak in.
Well, no, I had more to my compliment. Is it the fact that I have this? Speaking of Texas, this pimple here, thanks to the facial, that needs its own zip code. That even with the Zoom filter, it stands out like its own state. And so you guys were great in that y'all did not, point that out. And so I just need to point that out that y'all didn't point that out.
I don't see it.
I saw it, I didn't want to do it right from the beginning.
That usually happens after a facial, but it doesn't happen.
And I'm also flaking. Like,
what kind of facial did you have?
She had her very first microdermabrasion.
So I feel like a reptile losing its skin. So anyway. All right. Well, I need to go train, but is there anything else that, y'all, my final verdict, he's guilty as sin. I'm glad he's in jail and I hope he dies there. What about you guys?
Absolutely. Real quick, when he was convicted, through appeals, he went up again, was released for quite some time, and then I don't know if he was convicted again, but he was put in jail again. It's like, it just keeps going back and forth. Yeah, I do believe.
Well, like the justices said, at some point, we just have to call it done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is done.
Yeah, but when he gets out, which he might, doubtful, it'll all be brought up again. Or when he dies.
Well,
because it's fascinating, one like Watts and Manson and of course Manson. I don't know which was, I think they're both just as bad.
Yes.
Sharon was pregnant.
I see what you're saying.
There's no comparison, but a lot of
they
those
annihilate families.
Once they die, it seems there's more publicity, more movies, more documentaries.
Yeah, I definitely think he did it.
And
I'm usually not hard, without like smoking gun or pictures, but
yeah. Outline of a Murder is a Mr. Joseph production. What do you think, Joseph? Okay. And Mom, you guys have fun looking for creepy mannequins to dress up like creepy little girls from a creepy movie.
I'm hoping he already went.
No,
we'd like
together.
pictures. We want pictures of y'all shopping spree.
No. The house is full, as you know.
Creepy.
So I thought, this would be a time we go eat and we can do something together.
Oh yeah, that's what I think of. I'm like, oh, hey Mike, let's go look for mannequins to decorate.
And
the
he
house
says, oh, that'd be good because I don't see you enough. You're working all the time. People are there. We'll go look.
But did you say, what would you like to do?
No.
You can do anything you want because that's you.
No, he was telling me his plans for the day. So I'm hoping he went.
No, he's saving it for you. You're taking
I don't
understand
why.
I could see bonding over buying creepy mannequins of creepy little girls from a creepy movie.